Let's dive into the silent, but absolutely relentless battle happening inside our bodies every single second. We're talking about the microscopic arms race, this constant war between our immune system and the pathogens that see our bodies as, well, prime real estate. So let's take a look at how this fight actually goes down. That's not really a what if. That war is real, and it is happening as we speak. It's a constant struggle of invasion, deception, and defense between your cells and countless microbes. And believe me, the strategies on both sides are nothing short of genius. So, where do we even begin to defend ourselves? Well, our first line of defense is what's called the innate immune system. The best way to think about it is like a fortress, with high walls and guards on perpetual watch, totally ready to neutralize any threat they see. What's so amazing about this is that our immune cells aren't looking for one specific bad guy. Nope, they're generalists. They use these things called pattern recognition receptors, or PRRs, to spot common molecular signatures on invaders. We call those PAMPs. It's kind of like a security system that doesn't need to see a specific face, it just needs to recognize the general shape of a burglar ski mask to sound the alarm. So when one of those guards, a cell like a macrophage, spots an intruder, it performs this really clean three-step takedown called phagocytosis. First, it recognizes the threat. Then it literally extends its own body to completely engulf it. And finally, it traps the invader in a little bubble and just floods it with a deadly cocktail of acids and enzymes. It's the body's own microscopic cleanup crew, and it is brutally efficient. But what happens when the invaders are just too clever for the guards? Well, pathogens have evolved some incredibly sophisticated ways to breach our cellular walls. They don't just knock on the door. They've got skeleton keys, they've got brute force battering rams, the whole shebang. And this slide just perfectly illustrates two of their main strategies. On one side, you've got the subtle zipper mechanism. This is where bacteria like Listeria use a surface protein to basically trick one of our cell's receptors into pulling it inside. Then on the other side, you have the much more aggressive trigger mechanism. This is where bacteria like Salmonella use a sort of molecular needle to inject proteins that hijack the cell's internal skeleton, forcing it to literally erupt and swallow the bacterium whole. The real difference here is how our own cell reacts. With the zipper mechanism, you see this gentle, very localized wrapping of the cell membrane. But the trigger mechanism, that causes a massive, dramatic, and violent ruffling of the cell surface. It's really the difference between picking a lock and just blowing the door clean off its hinges. And just when we think we've got it all figured out, science shows us something totally new. It turns out some bacteria, like Pseudomonas aeruginosa, have found a third way in, the lipid zipper. They can actually bypass the protein receptors entirely and bind directly to fats on the cell surface, forcing the membrane to wrap around them. It just goes to show you, this arms race is constantly evolving. Okay, so the invader is inside the fortress. But getting in is only half the battle. Now it has to survive. And to do that, pathogens become absolute masters of espionage and deception, using these incredible tactics to hide from our internal security systems. I mean, just look at this toolkit of evasion. Some bacteria are constantly changing their surface proteins, like a spy swapping disguises. Others sabotage the alarm systems by modifying their outer coats or detectors can't even see them. And some, like the bacteria that causes tuberculosis, can even prevent that little acid bomb from going off once they've been eaten. They effectively disarm it from the inside. It's an absolute masterclass in survival. All right, let's switch gears and talk about viruses for a second. When a cell gets infected by a virus, it doesn't just give up. No, it sends out this desperate SOS signal called interferons. This is basically a chemical alarm that screams to all the neighboring cells, "Hey, I'm infected. Raise your shields. Prepare for an attack." But, of course, viruses are expert saboteurs. They've evolved ways to just cut the wires of this whole alarm system. The hepatitis C virus is a perfect example. It actually produces a protein that acts like a tiny pair of molecular scissors, and it goes and physically snips a key signaling protein in our cells, silencing the alarm before it can even spread. Now, if that interference signal does get through, it is on. It triggers this powerful, multi-pronged counterattack.
First, a protein called PKR grinds the cell's own factories to a halt, so the virus can't build any new copies of itself. At the same time, another protein acts like a paper shredder, just destroying the virus's genetic material. And if any new viruses do manage to get made, another weapon called tetherin literally ties them to the outside of the cell so they can't escape. It's a total, complete lockdown.
So far, we've seen invasion and evasion, but some pathogens, they're not content with just surviving. They decide to go on the offensive. They deploy superweapons, toxins that are designed to cause the maximum possible chaos and damage to us, the host. And one of their most devastating weapons is something called a superantigen. Okay, so normally our immune system activates its warrior T cells with extreme precision, like a sniper taking a single shot. A superantigen, though, it's more like a grenade. It bypasses all the normal safety checks and just hotwires a massive number of T cells all at once. And look at this number. 20%. A single superantigen can activate up to 1/5 of our body's entire T cell army at the same time. Now, to put that into perspective, a normal, very effective immune response might activate 0.01%. The scale of this activation is it's almost unimaginable. So what happens next? Well, all that activation triggers what's known as a cytokine storm. It's this catastrophic overreaction where the immune system releases such a flood of inflammatory signals that it starts attacking the body itself. This is the deadly mechanism behind things like toxic shock syndrome.
And beyond superantigens, there are two other big toxin strategies. You've got your pore-forming toxins, which are the brute force weapon. They literally punch holes in our cell membranes until the cell just bursts. And then you have the more insidious AB toxins. These are clever two-part weapons. The B part acts like a key to get into the cell, and the A part is the actual poison that gets released inside to sabotage some critical function, like how the diphtheria toxin completely shuts down a cell's ability to make proteins.
So when you step back and you look at all these strategies, our incredible defenses, and the microbes' even more incredible counter-offenses, it becomes crystal clear what this is. It's a co-evolutionary arms race that has been raging for millions of years. It's a constant cycle of innovation and adaptation on both sides, with no clear winner, and really no end in sight. And that leaves us with a pretty critical question, right? For every new evasion tactic a bacterium develops, for every new way a virus learns to silence our alarms, our immune systems are under intense pressure to respond. So, as this ancient war continues, the real question is, what will the next generation of weapons, and our defenses, even look like?